Hi there, everyone. This is Jackie with Jagco Yoga, and thank you for joining me for some yoga basics today. First and foremost, I do want to call out my furry assistant yoga teacher. He is lounging right here up in front, so there's a good chance he'll probably make an appearance throughout today's basics class. Now, what I was wanting to focus on today is a very common yoga pose, something that we do in pretty much every single vinyassa class. And oftentimes there's some common mistakes and some tips and tricks that are often helpful to getting into this posture a little bit more comfortably or handling that. And that is downward facing dog. It is an active rest posture, meaning it is an opportunity for us to let our heart rate come back to neutral. It's an opportunity to let our heat rebalance and come back to neutral. But it's also active. We're resisting gravity, we're pressing away, and it does require some alignment. And so, wanting to give us some tips and tricks. Just with all of my other classes, let's go ahead and get started with just a little bit of an intention setting. We're gonna find a drishti point, a point of unmoving, focused energy on the ground in front of us. Maybe it's a speck on the carpet, a speck on the ground, whatever it might be. Allow yourself to drill in there. Let your peripheral vision go a little bit fuzzy, or maybe even take your eyes closed, and just let yourself begin to focus in and begin to shift from I want into I intend. With our class today, maybe it's the desire to understand some of these yoga basics or spending just a little bit more time on our yoga practice. But whatever it is for you, give yourself 2 more big breaths into this space. On our inhale, we let our crown lift a little bit taller, elongate through our spine. As we exhale, we drop our shoulders. One more big breath, sealing in our practice for today. Use that exhale to seal it in. Go ahead, bring some focus back into your eyes or let them flutter open. And just find a comfortable seated position. You can find some gentle movements, maybe shoulder shrugs, opening sensations, whatever it is you need while we go over the beginning of this. First and foremost, one of the biggest things that I find with this is where our hands are making contact with the mat. It is really easy to dump a lot of weight into our wrists, when really the intention is that we're going to press the mat away. We want to elongate. And so one of the easiest ways to do this is to grip the mat. I often cue kitten fingertips or tiger paws or every single fingertip. So we're gripping the mat just with the tips of our fingers rather than pressing our palm into the mat. I almost like to envision a little pocket of air right underneath your palm, and we gently grip the mat to press it away. Another thing that we often find is that we will have arms rotated out or rotated in. We are looking for essentially a triangle. So putting our thumbs and forefingers together, a triangle right over our head that we are then pressing into the mat. So this triangle sensation, this triangle shape is where we find our opportunity to find neutral with our shoulders. Another thing too to take into consideration is where our stance is. So let's go ahead and get into that first and foremost. So meeting me in a tabletop position. A lot of times what happens with down dog is we find a position that's a little bit too short in stance or too long in stance for it to make sense for our anatomy. So starting off in our tabletop, go ahead, you can find some organic movements just to open up, warm up slightly before we get into this posture. Curling our toes under to begin with for balance, walking our palms forward about a palm width distance right to where the base of our fingers were resting. Now let's practice here. That grip, also check in, see if you can energetically see that triangle between your thumbs and your pointer fingers. Gripping the mat allows for us to almost puff up through that heart space. So we're not dumping into our shoulders, we're not dumping into our wrists. We're finding that nice energetic elongation through our upper body. And now we're going to step it back into plank pose. We're not here for long, so feel free to join me for just a second. Even if this gets intense, you can drop to your knees, but you're still in this elongated posture. So this plank pose is going to be the appropriate distance for our down dog. A lot of times people will try and find it at a shorter stance, and that's going to put a lot more pressure on your shoulders and a lot more pressure on our wrists. So starting with our plank pose or on knees, this is the elongation. This is where our feet are going to be. This is where our fingertips are going to be. And so setting up from here, then pressing into those fingertips, we're pulling our hips up and back. And this is where we start with our down dog. Sometimes this isn't exactly where we need to be. This doesn't necessarily feel perfect to begin with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to recommend taking a really big deep bend in your knees, hovering your knees about 6 inches off the mat, and now press into those fingertips, pressing our fingertips away. That sets our shoulders up to where they need to be. That sets our hips up where they need to be. One line of energy. We're not dumping in our shoulders. We're not dumping in our wrists. And then keeping that length, we can straighten through our legs. Another thing too to be aware of is heels do not need to touch the mat. Touching the mat with our heels does not necessarily mean that we are advancing on the yoga scoreboard. It's just where our anatomy is that day. Oftentimes I'll cue softening through something, softening through the heart, head. You can shake your head yes or no here. We're not holding on, we're not looking. And we're allowing our heels to just soften towards the earth. Now, let me show you what it looks like. If your stance is too short, you can oftentimes see that you're putting too much pressure on your shoulders, or you're trying to hold your weight up, or we're rounding through our shoulders. The goal here is to find that nice elongation through both upper and lower torso to come back to that neutrality. Go ahead and meet me back in our tabletop posture, giving yourself some nice wags of the tail, shoulder shrugs, hip circles, whatever it might be. And then once you're ready, go ahead, come back down to that comfortable seated position towards the top of your mat. And let your hands rest where they're comfortable, maybe on knees, maybe in lap, maybe petting your furry friend. Find that drishti point. Bring yourself back towards that intention. You can even let your eyes go closed, focusing in, giving yourself breath and ease here, and allowing yourself to return back to neutral. Once you feel balanced, once you feel like you have arrived back in your mind space, bring your hands to heart center or press palm into chest, and give yourself acknowledgement of the willingness and effort you have put forward into making your yoga practice that much better, that much more informed, and allow yourself to find the ease in that. Please know the inner teacher and light within me so recognizes, so appreciates, and so welcomes the inner teacher and light within you. And one way we say this is to bow our heads and say, Namaste. Thank you very, very much for joining me in this practice, in this meditation, in this ability to find down dog in different ways. If you enjoyed it, please go ahead, give me a thumbs up. If you are interested in other yoga basics, 30 to 45 minute resets, or 60-minute long full classes, consider subscribing and not missing anything as far as this channel is concerned. Again, this is Jackie with Jagco Yoga, and I appreciate you being here. Namaste.